This is what I want to look at. I want to back up to the prophecies, the modern day prophecies from September and January. Nation, I'm going to break this down into key points. Number 1 and number 2. Nations would come into turmoil. And number 2, there would be a massive plague-like invasion. So let's compare that to where we are as compared to where Egypt and Israel was. Okay, nations. So we're going to look at that. Egypt was the center of wealth. Let me go back over here. Egypt was the center of wealth and commerce. Israel was, the entire world revolved around Egypt in those days. So this word from Chuck Pierce says that nations, when he says nations, you know what nations in plurality means? When you put parentheses around it, it means a lot, it means a whole lot, it means the world. So all of a sudden we've got a pandemic that is affecting, somebody all over the world. It's invisible, we can't see it. So the whole world is affected. We're going to come into turmoil because of something we can't see. So not only do we have the nations, the world coming into conflict and turmoil, at this time the entire world being Egypt was in turmoil. It was under a plague. So Israel had lived 430 years under an oppression. Let's call it a plague. Moses showed up with God by his side, God in front of him, God behind him, God all around him, and brought 10 plagues. God spoke 10 plagues upon Egypt to break their will and to break their backs. So that leads me to key point number 3. Key point number 3, he says it will remain through Passover. Let me explain to you what Passover is. Passover was that last plague. That last plague. It's a bad junk going on. So this last plague is, hey, the firstborn of every house is going to be dead in the morning. So the only way out of this is to take some blood from a lamb, a pure and perfect lamb, and put it on your doorpost, and the angel of death will pass over your house. But Egyptians didn't believe in Jehovah God, so they didn't do that, and they lost thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Thousands of people. So you know what? The Passover, that last plague, is the one thing that broke the will and broke the back of Pharaoh and the Egyptian reign and Egyptian hold that he had on the Israelites. And then they relented and they said, look, you just got to go. You got to go. Your God is God and we are not. So I want to look at 2 verses. Go ahead and just put them up back to back if you want to. Exodus chapter 8, verse 1. And Exodus chapter 9, verse 1. I want you to notice both of them say the same thing. They say this, let my people go. I love that. There's even a song, Pharaoh, Pharaoh. We sang it in the 90s with kids. Hey, oh, baby, let my people go. I don't even know the moves to it, but I remember how it goes. So Pharaoh says, hey, speaking from the word from the Lord himself, he says, hey, this is what Moses says, not Pharaoh. He says, hey, Pharaoh, let my people go. They're not your people. See, here's what we've got to learn. We are not of this world. We're just passing through this. So here is your option. Let my people go because I want them to worship me. This is what he says. Let my people go so that they may worship me. Now, God breaks the bonds of slavery, of addictions, of selfishness, of pride, of ignorance, of apathy. He breaks the bonds of this mess over us, laziness, lack of commitment. He breaks these bonds over us. And when He does, and we allow Him to do that, He does it, and He'll do this for there may be a handful of reasons. But I can promise you the reason that trumps all other reasons is so we may worship Him. So that we may worship Him. So let's keep in mind the one thing that is deserving from us, that is expected from us, is that we may worship Him. Keep that in mind. Don't lose that thought. So that we may worship Him. If God is leading us out and into a phase, through a phase, passing by a phase, if He's leading us anywhere from one thing to another, it is number one, trumps everything, so that we may worship Him. You say, well, He's leading me to protect me. Yes, but to worship Him is first. He's leading me so He can give me a new home, a new land. Yes, but worship Him is first. It is the very first thing. Let my people go so that they may worship me, not you. You've got all kinds of little gods that you're worshiping in Egypt. I'm the true and living God, and my people want to worship me. And the ones that want to worship me, I'm going to free. The ones that don't want to worship me are going to stay here, and their firstborn are going to die. So, key point number 4. The modern translation, or the modern prophecy. The world would, the Passover would end one phase, and then another one would begin simultaneously, just from one phase to the next. So our country right now is struggling. There's just fights going on left and right. People are protesting. You know, in Michigan, they're actually gathering and cutting people's hair for free on the steps of the Capitol, just to protest. You know what? There again, I just got to say, you know, we deserve freedom. That's the thing that millions of people, millions of men and women have died, so we have. So I just think that there's too many people that have built our freedom has been built upon lives upon top of lives, and the last thing we need to do is disrespect that. I'm going somewhere with this. So how do we properly navigate phase 1 of our reopening? How are we going to do this? So what's the church's role? Key point number 5. He said, I believe there will be a transfer of wealth. Let's just look at what happens when a transfer of wealth happens. Let's look at Exodus chapter 12 again, 35 and 36. Now I want you to notice, I love this, the way it breaks it down. I love the way it says it. The people of Israel had also done as Moses told them. Now let's just stop right there a minute. They did as Moses told them. Now this is the guy that was part of their crew that left them, dug a hole in the sand, put a dude in it, buried him, killed him, left for 40 years, had an experience barefooted on a hillside, on a rocky slope with a burning bush. Now, this is the guy that came all the way back across that desert to say, God has sent me, brought plague upon plague. So this is what he says. As Moses told them, for they had asked the Egyptians for silver and gold and jewelry and clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they left them, or let them have what they asked. Whatever they asked for. In fact, they plundered the Egyptians. Not only did they give them what they asked for, they plundered them. So, breaking this down, Moses told them to ask for wealth. Now, this is the guy, this is the word from the top, by the way. I mean, when you get the word from the top, it's like, hey, we're not supposed to move that machine right here. Well, the boss told me to move it. Well, then you better move it. So, the word come from the top. And not just from Moses, from God. You tell the people to ask for whatever they want when they leave there. Now, I want you to get a mental picture of this. I'm going to touch on it again in just a second. I want you to get a mental picture of this. This was slaves. Now, slaves are the lowest life form in slave society. If you had a goat that was about 15 years old and about halfway ready to die, and you had a slave, you'd sacrifice the slave and not the goat. It was the lowest form of life. The slave had no value whatsoever. And a slave is supposed to ask the wealthiest people on the face of the earth for everything that they have, to the point of plundering. And they gave it. So that's where we are here with this. So here's the thing. Don't despise the journey. In the phases, don't despise the journey. Let's embrace the journey. I'm going to be honest with you. The thing that I have embraced is the fact that Tina and I get to sit side by side, and we get to speak to you guys online, back hundreds and hundreds and thousands. I don't know how many people joining in. We get to speak to you, and I get to do it with my wife, my favorite person in the whole world, sitting right beside me, and we just get to talk about the Word. We get to talk about what God's doing. I have embraced. I don't ever want to quit doing that. I love doing that. I want to keep doing that. We've decided we're not going to stop. So don't despise the journey. Let me just explain to you. Moses comes in, God speaks one plague upon Egypt, and I'm betting about half those people pack their bags. Man, everything, did you see the water all turned to blood? All the cattle are dead. Get your bags packed, we're leaving tomorrow. I mean, we have this mental picture of what it should look like. God, I ask you to help me, and then when I see the first sign, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. if they'd have left in that timing, it would have been the wrong timing. See, when we move in God's timing, the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the just. So, notice, Moses told them to ask the Egyptians, not after the second, the fourth, the 12th, or the second, the fourth, the ninth plague, but after the 10th plague, after a series of plagues, after they have decimated the entire land and the people, Moses said, now go ask them for their wealth. Don't take it. Don't sneak around and manipulate to get it. Don't steal it. And don't feel like you're entitled to it because you've been here for almost 11 generations. Don't do that. See, the devil, through rash judgments, will have you take something every time. He will have you to steal something. Now, there's a few things that I think the Lord is okay for us to steal. He's okay for us to steal away a little time and be in silence and solitude with Him. He's okay for us to steal away and kiss a granddaughter while she's running through playing. I think He's okay with that. I don't think He's okay with us taking something that doesn't belong to us. The Lord, on the other hand, through patience and divine will and divine power, will have us favor upon us to request it. And I want to show you something. He gave them favor. He gave the lowest form of life on earth favor to request from the wealthiest and most influential and affluent people in the entire world. I want you to give me, told him, said, make sure you go ask them because I'm giving you favor. Go ask them for their wealth. Okay, here, just take it. Take it. What else do you want? Well, I like them shoes. Well, take them. I like those clothes hanging on the wall. Take them, take them, take them. I like those earrings. Take them, take them. If Israel had taken or stolen anything, then that would have eliminated. God would have been out of the picture because they could have done that without God. See, when God gives us the favor, then the return is exponential. See, their deliverance would have been put on hold, would have been halted after all those generations of waiting. But notice with me, Israel requested and Egypt gave. They gave so much that in verse 36, the word plunder is used. I'm talking about plunder. I'm talking about taking everything. I'm talking about wiping out that place and leaving with great wealth. They plundered Egypt, took it all, everything that they asked for, the Egyptians freely gave to them. A bunch of slaves. I just can't wrap my mind around it. A bunch of slaves left the most powerful and wealthiest nation on earth. They walked out with the entire workforce. They walked out with all of their clothing, all of their money, and all of their belongings that once belonged to the Egyptians, and the Egyptians were glad to give it. So, slaves plundered the wealthiest nation on earth with nothing more than the favor of God. Now, I think sometimes we try to work something too hard. I think sometimes we try to pull swords. I think sometimes we try to pull politics. I think sometimes we're on the phone too much to get our way, when all we really need to do is wait upon the favor of the Lord, and then everything else will come. So, with that transfer of wealth, what did they do with it? What did they do with their transfer of wealth? Think about it. Did they build civilizations? Did they build worship centers? Did they reach cultures for the living God? What did they do with it? No, they did none of that. They blew it on a golden calf. They blew their wealth and their possessions. you're talking about having it just a little time. They didn't have it for long. They get all the way to the base of Mount Sinai, and Moses has not come back when they thought he should already. Remember, go back just a few weeks ago when you were ready to pack your bags at the first plague. It took 10 of those. Moses is not back. God's not going to take us this far and quit on us. So they decide, let's put all in and let's have us a big party and let's create our own God. We'll create our own God. I'm going to tell you, we're people, we're good at that. We're going to create our own thing to worship. They blew it on a golden calf. Now, these are the people that witnessed 10 plagues be brought up on the nation of Egypt and yet not touch a hair on their head, an animal or a child. They watched a pillar of fire hold back an entire Egyptian army with chariots. This is the same people without touching them. They witnessed the sea open up, the wind blow the ground dry. They walked across. They saw the massive walls of water. They saw it. They walked completely out, completely unscathed, dry without a drop of water on them. They heard the cries from the Egyptians drowning in the same place they just left from. See, they drank fresh water from a bitter pond with no more than just pitching a stick into it. Just pitching a stick into it. They watched water go from bitter to sweet that quick. They saw miracle after miracle after miracle of God by the hand of God, and they still took their wealth and they gave it to something else. They blew it on building something to worship. A thing, an image. Then here's the worst part. Then after its construction, they gave all of the credit for what God had done to the stupid thing they just built. This, I will show you. Exodus chapter 32, verse 4. And he received, this being Aaron, the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graven tool and made a golden calf. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Where's your Moses now? Where's your Moses now? Moses is up here talking to God face to face, getting the word of the Lord. He's getting the law, and it even got so bad, God says, "Back up, I'm killing them." I mean, when you make God that mad, you better hope we got a Moses somewhere around. I mean, seriously, Moses he's like, "Back up, don't try to talk me out of them. I'm figuring wipe them out. I'm going to wipe them off the face of the earth." And Moses is like, no. I'll start a new civilization with you, Moses. No. Love on these people. Give them time. They don't know how to be free yet. And God changed his mind because of Moses. So, how do we successfully negotiate and navigate a phase 1 reopening in our lives? How do we regain freedom? How do we step into freedom and really know how to be free? How do we do that? I'm going to tell you, according to the story in Exodus, that's the best one I don't want to go anywhere else for my history. I think the answer lies in investment. I think we have to invest wisely. Invest wisely. Now, I'm not talking about hoarding up and buying and wearing masks and gloves and following proper social distancing protocols. I'm not talking about all that. I'm talking about mentioning in my heart what I'm mentioning is much greater. It's the greatest thing that we can do. It's a deeper level of investment. There's no investment like this investment. I don't care if we have a lot of money or the lack of. There's no investment like this investment. And it is the Exodus 8 chapter 8 verse 1, the Exodus chapter 9 verse 1. It is that God-phased plan of worshiping Him. There's where the investment lies. There's where the meat of the investment is. God has set us free so that we can worship Him. Now, let me say this again. There's people in this country over these couple of hundred years that have died, and our nation, our freedoms, our flags fly upon the sweat and the toil and the blood of their dead bodies. I think that if you want to be that disrespectful to say, "You died for my freedom, but thank you, but no thank you," I think that is a slap in the face. I'm just telling you like it is. These are our people in our life. These are our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, our great-great-grandfathers. These are women who never knew or heard a word, never knew if their family was ever coming back home again. They didn't have Skype and Zoom. They didn't have all these platforms. When their children and their husbands left for war, they were by themselves and may have went to their graves and never knew if their husbands or sons died or lived. Thousands and thousands and millions of lives lost. For you and I to say thank you, but no thank you? Oh my gosh. Let me get a flag. I'll put it on. Wear it. You know what? God has set us free so that we may worship Him, which brings me to point 2. Number 2 is there's 2 people that will give their lives for you, and that's a soldier and that's the Lord. And the Lord himself hung up on a cross, lifted up, just like that serpent in the wilderness, lifted up. If I be lifted up, I'll draw all men into me. He's lifted up, and you know what? All we have to do is call upon the name of the Lord and thank you, but no thank you. I don't get it. I don't get it. Thank you, but no thank you. Thank you for the sacrifice, but no thank you. You know what? I think if we will focus more on the cross, more on the sacrifice of the cross, more on the one that hung on the cross, more on the one who rose from the dead, then we won't worry so much about what's going on around us. Because right there's where worship is. Right there's where our heart should be. God has given us great freedom so that we can tell people about Him. About Him. You know what? What's our conversation? Why has God given us? Why did God lift us up? Why did God transfer wealth to us? I'm going to look at that in just a second. Why did God transfer wealth into the Christian community? Why, for the first time ever, was the church included into a stimulus package? Why has God given us freedoms in this world today? It's not so we can spend time at home on Sundays. And I'm a church guy, so I'm going to tell you, yes, if you're viewing and you're listening online, I think I appreciate it and I love you for doing so. But I'm going to tell you, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together. Because you can always find a golden calf at home on Sunday mornings. Always. You can, and you want to know, I found one. Years and years and years I found one. And you know what? I said, look, I'm not going to do that ever again. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Amen. I had boats. They pulled out of my driveway after service. So I'm just telling you how it is. God's not given us these kinds of freedoms and transferred wealth into our lives so that we can ignore Him and give other things credit for what He has done. God is transferring wealth. You say, Pastor, what does that wealth look like? I don't know, don't care. Is it monetary? Might be. I don't care. I don't care. I don't know. This is what I think it all surrounds. I think it's a transfer of wealth of peace, a wealth of health, a wealth of prosperity, a wealth of money where you need money. I think it's supplying our needs. I think it's a wealth of healing. I think this is the transfer of wealth that is coming into our lives. Not just one simple thing like money. So, are we going to use it to glorify Him, reach the lost, and encourage the believer? Are we going to do that? He's not transferring peace and wealth and prosperity and encouragement and health into our lives so we can just become a worshiper of another thing. See, Israel failed. In their phase one, they failed. Now, in the long term, they succeeded. But that first phase group, it's us. Here's the first phase right here. Let's not do like Israel because they failed. How can we do better? How can we do better? Now's not the time. Now's the time to serve Jesus. With what we have is the time to serve Jesus. Now's the time for deliverance. Now's the moment to worship Him. So I want to say, be careful, because getting off track was easy for Israel. It will be easy for us. Hey guys, you were doing this, and you stopped on us, and you watched us, and I appreciate it. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for spending some time with us. I pray that you enjoyed the service today. Let me take this opportunity to invite you out personally. We're located on the square in Sparta. Our service times are at 9 and 11 every Sunday morning. We'll meet you at the door with a hug. We'll meet you at the door with some coffee ready and some donuts if you want. And let me just take a real quick minute to invite you over to our Smithville campus. For those of you who can't drive over to Sparta, drive over to Smithville, 11 o'clock for now, at 614 Murphy Street in Smithville, Tennessee. So one of our campuses, Christpoint Church, we're real people, we're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. Welcome home.